Hey photographers, welcome back. This week we're going to talk about how your camera works. We're going to look at the basic parts of the camera and how they work to capture images. We're also going to look at the parts that control exposure. Understanding manual exposure is what gives you control over your image, what you want to say and how you want to say it. Photos are captured by your camera in two parts, the lens and the camera body. Light passes through the lens and is focused to the digital sensor in the camera body, which captures the image. I'll be speaking about two different types of cameras here, the DSLR and the mirrorless camera. The DSLR, which is a digital single lens reflex camera, which uses a mirror placed behind the lens to show you the true image you'll see in the photo. A mirrorless camera is a type of camera that works without a reflex mirror. Light passes through the lens directly to the digital sensor, which then displays your image on the camera's LCD screen, allowing you to adjust settings and preview your image before it's shot. Next, we're going to talk about the lenses. Lenses are what focus the image onto the sensor. Lenses are created into focal lengths, which define the amount of zoom. A lower focal length gives a wider angle of view. A higher, longer focal length gives a narrower crop of the scene and brings your subject closer. Within the lens, there's the aperture. Most lenses have an aperture or an iris. The iris is what is used to narrow down the diameter of the opening, allowing more or less light to pass through. It works like a pupil in your eye. The narrower it is, the less light it lets in. Aperture openings are given in values of forms of f-stops. Apertures is one of the three components that make up the ability to change exposure. Now moving into the camera body, after going through the lens, light arrives at the camera body where it is captured by a sensor. Then the image file is stored in the camera. Within the camera body is the viewfinder. All DSLRs and many mirrorless cameras have viewfinders. It can be optical or electronic. Most cameras have a live view on the back of the camera on a screen that shows the same image as what you see in the viewfinder. In a DSLR digital camera with the optical viewfinder, once the light arrives from the lens, it bounces into a semi-permeable mirror. Most of the light then reflects up to a pentaprism and then into the viewfinder. This is where you view, focus, and adjust the exposure for your composition. In a mirrorless camera, the light always goes directly onto the sensor. From the sensor, the live view is transmitted digitally to the electronic viewfinder or to the back screen. Next, we'll talk about the shutter. The shutter is another component that makes up the exposure. The shutter is the mechanism that lets the light onto the sensor for a set amount of time called shutter speed. When you press the shutter button, the curtain slides open and lets the light onto the camera sensor. Then, after the set time of the shutter speed, the curtain shuts. The sensor is blocked again. Let's talk about the sensor. Digital sensors are composed of pixels. Pixels are tiny solar cells that convert light into electricity. When the light passes through the lens and it is focused and exposed correctly, it is captured by the sensor. Let's talk about the third component that makes up exposure, the ISO sensitivity. You can adjust the camera's sensitivity to light. The levels are broken up to numbered values. The lower the ISO number, the less sensitive. The higher the ISO number, the more sensitive to light. Now you have a basic understanding of how the camera works, and you've been introduced to vocabulary that we will be using to describe the photographic process. We will look at exposure in much more detail next week. Thanks for watching.